Wyoming Territory, autumn of 1874. The wind came hard off the Bighorns that morning, dry as old bone and sharp enough to cut, when they dragged her into town. Cassidy Thorne's hands were tied behind her back with rough hemp rope. Dust clung to her skirts. Her lip bled where her husband had struck her in front of the preacher and half the town. She did not cry. She did not beg. She walked barefoot through the center of Red Rock, head high, while the whispers followed her like flies. "Witch!" someone muttered. "She's cursed, I swear it. Her boy died after she touched him." She kept walking. Her husband, Silas Thorne, rode just behind her, tall on his chestnut gelding, self-satisfied and righteous. He had spent the last week spreading lies, and the town had eaten them up like warm pie. He said Cassidy stirred strange brews. That she muttered to herself. That she killed their son with a spell. The truth was simpler. Little Nathaniel had taken sick in the spring. Fever, then coughing, then silence. Cassidy had buried him with her own hands, alone, while Silas drank himself blind in the barn. She had not spoken a word since. And now they were bringing her to the jailhouse not for protection, but for punishment. The sheriff had been gone for weeks on a northern patrol, and in his absence, Silas had taken over. He called it justice. Cassidy knew better. But the sheriff had returned 2 nights before. No one had told her. The door to the jail creaked open. Cassidy was shoved inside. She stumbled, caught herself on the wall. A man stood inside. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Quiet eyes the color of storm clouds. His badge caught the sunlight. "Sheriff?" Silas barked. "She needs to be locked up. We'll hold a trial come Sunday." The man looked at Cassidy. Then at Silas. "What's the charge?" Silas puffed up. "Witchcraft. She's cursed my cattle. She killed our boy. She talks to herself and keeps herbs in jars." "You asked the preacher?" "Ask anyone?" The sheriff nodded once. Walked forward slow. "Your name?" "Silas Thorne. I am her husband. And you're accusing your wife of witchcraft." "She is no wife of mine. Not anymore." The sheriff's jaw ticked. He turned to Cassidy. "And you?" She looked at him for the first time. She expected more judgment, more fear. But there was none. Just quiet watching. "Cassidy," she said. Her voice cracked. "Cassidy Thorne?" The sheriff nodded. "You can sit down, Cassidy." He turned back to Silas. "Take your hands off your gun." Silas blinked. "What?" "You raised your hand to a bound woman. You parade her through town, call her a witch, and expect me to clap along? Not in my town." Silas stepped forward. "You do not understand, I do," the sheriff said. "I see a man who lost his son and blamed the nearest person who could not fight back." Silas's face went red. "You are siding with her?" "I do not take sides. I keep peace. And I do not jail people for grief and herbs." Silas's hand twitched. The sheriff's gun was out before the twitch finished. Cassidy flinched. Silas froze. "Get out," the sheriff said. Silas stared. Then spat at the ground and stormed out. The door slammed behind him. The sheriff holstered his gun and turned back to her. "You need a doctor?" She shook her head. "Water?" She nodded. He passed her a cup. She drank it slow, careful not to spill. Her wrists were raw where the rope had been. He noticed. "I will get salve," he said. "Why?" Her voice was ragged. "Why would you help me?" He knelt in front of her, opened the first aid box from under his desk. "Because you did not break," he said. She stared. "Most people break when they are lied about. You walked through them like you were already free." He dabbed ointment onto her wrists. His touch was gentle. Not afraid. Not repulsed. Just steady. "I am Sheriff Malden Pierce," he said. She nodded slowly. "Thank you." He looked up at her, and for a long moment either of them spoke. That night, he walked her to the boarding house himself. Paid for her room. Told the landlady he would personally vouch for Cassidy's character. The town watched. And whispered. But no one said a word to Malden Pierce. He had lost his wife 5 years ago in a fire. Since then, he had spoken little and smiled less. But now, standing beside Cassidy, his hand resting lightly at her back, something in his silence had changed. He showed up the next morning with breakfast wrapped in a towel. Eggs and warm bread. "You should eat," he said. She did. Careful bites. Watching him. "They will not stop talking," she said. "I know. They will say I bewitched you too." He looked at her. "They already are. And you do not care?" He shrugged. "They are wrong." Her throat tightened. "You believe me." "I do." Something broke inside her then, not pain, not fear, but something older. A wall she had built long ago, brick after brick, after the baby, after Silas started drinking, after the town turned cold. She started crying. He did not reach for her. Just sat there, letting her cry until it passed. The next day, he showed her his horses. Let her brush them. Told her about his wife, how she used to laugh while she built fences better than any man could. Told her about the fire. How he went back in twice. How he still heard her voice sometimes when the wind picked up. Cassidy listened. And for the first time in years she smiled. They spent days like that. Quiet, steady. He walked her home each evening. Never touched her without asking. Never once looked at her like she was broken. One morning she brought him a bundle of herbs. "For the pain in your shoulder," she said. "You favor it." He blinked. "How did you know?" "You move stiff when you draw your gun." He smiled, small and real. "Thank you." The town kept whispering. But now, some of them nodded at her. Some of them remembered how she had nursed their children through the fever last year. How she had given up her own food to feed the church orphanage. Malden stood beside her through it all. And in time, she stood taller. One night, after supper, he walked her to the porch. The moon was high, the air cold. He took her hand. Just held it. "I never thought I would feel this again," he said quietly. She looked at him. "What?" "Hope." She stepped closer. "I never thought anyone would ever see me." "Not really." "I see you," he said. She reached up, touched his cheek. "And I see you." They kissed slow, sure. Like two people who knew what loss was, and were finally ready for something else. Something better. Something true. The first frost came overnight. Cassidy woke to white lace on the window glass and the smell of wood smoke curling under the doorframe. She sat up slow, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and listened to the quiet. No voices. No boots on the stairs. Just the ticking of the old clock in the hall and the hush of a town still asleep. She pulled on her boots and stepped out onto the back stoop of the boarding house. Her breath fogged in the air. The sky was pale, the sun not yet risen, but she could see the faint outline of the bighorns to the west, their peaks dusted in snow. By the time she reached the sheriff's office, the stove inside was already lit. Malden was at his desk, sleeves rolled to the elbow, going through a ledger with a pencil worn to the nub. His hair was still damp from washing, combed straight back, and his shirt was patched at the left cuff. "You're early," he said without looking up. "You always leave the door unlocked?" "Just for you." She crossed to the stove and poured herself coffee from the dented tin pot. It was bitter and strong. She drank it anyway. "I brought something." He looked up. She held out a folded cloth. Inside were 3 thick biscuits and a jar of chokecherry jam. "Mrs. Halcombe let me use her oven last night. Said I could bake as long as I didn't speak to her." He took one, broke it in half, and spread jam with a careful hand. "You always give food to men who arrest your husband. You didn't arrest him." "Maybe I should have." She sat down across from him. "You said the law was for keeping peace." not settling scores. His mouth twitched. You remember everything I say? Only when it's something worth remembering. He took a bite. Ate in silence. Then, I've been thinking. That sounds dangerous. He gave her a look, then leaned back in the chair. About what comes next for you. Her fingers tightened on the coffee cup. He saw it. Sat forward again. No one's forcing anything. I want you safe. And steady. And not answering to anyone who doesn't deserve your time. I don't have money, she said. Not much. Enough to last maybe 2 weeks if I'm careful. I could take in sewing, but there's already 3 widows doing that. I thought about working for the boarding house, but I'd have to share a room with the cook's niece, and she talks in her sleep. She paused. Loud. Malden nodded. What if you worked for the town? She blinked. Doing what? I need a clerk. Records are a mess. No one's transcribed the land claims since spring. And you've got clearer handwriting than I do. I've never worked for a man with a badge. Good. I've never hired anyone who speaks their mind without flinching. She looked at him, long and quiet. All right, she said at last. But I expect a fair wage. You'll have it. And time in the afternoons to walk alone. As long as you come back. That afternoon, he cleared a space on the second desk and brought her a stack of maps and a fresh pen. She dipped it once, tested it on a scrap, and began copying names into the ledger. They worked in companionable quiet. Now and then, he'd ask about a name he didn't recognize, and she'd tell him who it was, who they married, where they came from. She knew more than he did about most of the people in town. He listened without interrupting. As the sun dipped low, she set the pen down and stretched her fingers. I forgot how good it feels to be useful. You were never anything but. She looked at him, and something unspoken passed between them. Not heat. Not want. Something steadier. Something that held. That evening, he walked her to the edge of the boarding house steps. I'll see you in the morning, she said. He hesitated. Then, quietly, I'd like to take you up the ridge this Sunday. Just before dusk. There's a place I know. You can see all the way to the Powder River when the light's right. She studied him. You asking me on a walk, Sheriff? I'm asking you to let me show you something I don't share with many people. She nodded once. I'd like that. He didn't touch her. Just stood there, watching her go, until she slipped inside and closed the door behind her. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She remembered the way his voice softened when he offered her the job. The quiet way he stood beside her without stepping ahead. She thought of the ridge, and the light, and the way his eyes held steady on hers when he said he wanted her safe. She turned on her side, pulled the blanket higher, and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she slept through until morning. Sunday came with a thin veil of cloud and the scent of damp grass rising off the hills. Malden waited by the livery just past noon, a wool coat slung over his arm and a canvas-wrapped bundle tied to his saddle. Cassidy arrived on foot, her skirt hem damp from walking through the meadow's edge. She'd braided her hair back, tied with a strip of dark blue calico. It was the first color she'd worn in months. He helped her onto the bay mare he'd saddled for her, then mounted his own gelding. They rode uphill at a slow pace, the horses picking their way through the narrow game trail that threaded between granite outcrops and clusters of juniper. Neither of them spoke much, and the quiet held easy between them. At the ridge, he dismounted first, and tied the reins to a low pine. She followed, brushing bark from her gloves before stepping to the edge. The land opened wide below them, rolling gold grass, dark green swaths of fir, and far in the distance, the faint shimmer of the Powder River winding eastward. A hawk circled far above, its cry trailing on the wind. She drew in a breath, slow and deep. I didn't know it looked like this from so high. I come here when I need to remember, he said. Where I am? What's worth keeping? He spread the canvas on a flat patch of stone. From inside he drew 2 tin plates, a loaf of bread wrapped in linen, slices of smoked venison, and a small wedge of hard cheese. She knelt beside him, her skirt folding neatly beneath her, and helped divide the food. They ate in silence at first. The wind tugged her braid loose, and she tucked the strands behind her ear without thinking. "When I was a girl," she said, "I used to believe the sky ended just beyond the fields. That if you kept walking, you'd fall off into nothing. What changed your mind?" "My brother. He joined a trail crew when he was 15. Sent home a letter from Kansas with a pressed flower in it. It was red and strange looking. I kept it under my pillow until the paper wore through. Where is he now?" "Died outside Dodge 3 winters ago. Caught between a horse and a frozen creek." "He didn't say he was sorry." "She didn't need him to." She turned toward him, not quite meeting his eyes. "You ever think about leaving?" "I did once. Right after the fire. Thought I'd take a freight job west. Start over where no one knew my name." "What stopped you?" He looked out toward the river. "I saw a boy get trampled during a cattle drive through town. Could have died if someone hadn't pulled him clear. Afterward, he said he thought I was a ghost. That I came out of the dust like something meant to keep him breathing." Cassidy's voice softened. "So you stayed." "I figured if a ghost could still save someone, maybe I wasn't one." They sat with that for a long while. The clouds shifted, casting slow-moving shadows over the hills. "I don't know what kind of life I have left," she said. "Everything I thought I knew unraveled." He leaned back on one elbow. "Sometimes it has to. So the right things can fit." "Do you believe that?" "I believe some things break because they were never meant to hold us." She looked at him then, fully, the way one looks at a man not for what he's done, but for all the things he's quietly carried. The wind picked up again, and he reached over to steady her plate when it skidded. His fingers brushed hers. She didn't pull away. "I'd like to come here again," she said. "Maybe when the snow starts. I'll bring a blanket." She smiled faintly. "You always plan ahead?" "Only when it matters." They stayed until the sun touched the edge of the far hills, then rode down in the long light, the horses' hooves muffled on the pine needles. When they reached the edge of town, he rode with her to the boarding-house steps, dismounted, and held her reins while she climbed down. She placed her hand over his on the saddle horn a moment longer than necessary. "You'll be at the office tomorrow?" He nodded. "You'll be late if you keep baking for half the town." "I'm not baking for the town." His gaze held hers. "No?" She didn't answer. Just stepped back, her hand falling to her side. He watched her go until the door closed behind her. Then he turned, mounted, and rode toward the last of the light, the wind at his back and something steadier than longing settling in his chest. By mid-November, the wind had hardened. It swept through the valley with sharp teeth, flinging grit against windows and tugging loose shingles from the livery roof. The first snow would come soon. The air had that smell to it, clean and metallic, like iron soaked in creek water. Cassidy had started wearing gloves to the office, the kind with threadbare fingertips that still let her feel the pen. She worked by the window, the stove behind her throwing off steady heat. Malden kept pace beside her, sorting warrants, updating the shipping logs, and writing letters for the judge who couldn't hold a pen since the stroke. They'd grown used to each other's rhythms. She didn't ask unless she needed something. He didn't fill quiet just to hear himself. Their partnership moved like oxen through a field, deliberate, matched, slow enough to last. One morning, she found a folded scrap beside her inkwell. A pressed prairie crocus inside. No note. He didn't look up when she sat down. She didn't mention it. Later that day, while copying a land complaint filed by a woman outside Shell Creek, she paused. "You believe folks can do harm with words alone?" He set down his pencil. "Depends who's listening. This one says her neighbor cursed her sheep. They won't eat, and her boy's been waking with scratches on his arms. She wants the man fined or removed." He rubbed his jaw. "Could be mange." Could be the boy's dreams. Could be the neighbor's just someone she doesn't like. He nodded once. You think she's lying? I think people find shapes for their fear. And sometimes those shapes look like the ones who stand alone. His eyes met hers. You still feel alone? I don't, she said. Not lately. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. The warmth in his gaze said enough. That night, after supper, she knocked at his door. He lived above the blacksmith shop, in a room that smelled faintly of oil and ash. He opened it in shirt sleeves, suspenders slung off his shoulders, a book face down on the table behind him. I was passing by, she said, though her cheeks were pink from more than the wind. You want to come in? She hesitated only a moment. Yes. He stepped aside. She entered, took in the neat cot, the pine table, the coat hung carefully by the stove. No clutter. No dust. No sign of anyone else. I brought something, she said, unwrapping a cloth from under her shawl. A small jar of preserved peaches. The last of her summer stores. Didn't think I'd ever taste these again, he said, taking it gently. They're soft. But sweet. Like you? She looked at him, not startled, just steady. That's not how most folks describe me. They don't see what I see. You never say what that is. I don't think I have to. She stepped closer. The stove clicked as it settled. Somewhere below, the blacksmith's hammer rang once, then stopped. I never thought I'd come back to anything good, she said. Not after what he did. Not after what I lost. He touched her hand just once, just lightly. You didn't come back. You built it again. Piece by piece. You helped. I was just waiting, he said, for someone worth standing beside. She reached up, fingers brushing the side of his face. He closed his eyes under the touch, not because he was afraid, but because he was full. I want to stay, she said. He opened his eyes. Tonight? No. Not just tonight. She watched him carefully. I want a life. With you. If you want it too. He didn't answer right away. He stepped back, opened the drawer near the stove, pulled out something wrapped in soft cloth. When he unwrapped it, she saw a brooch. Simple. Brass. Etched with a mountain laurel. This was hers, he said. My wife's. I kept it because I didn't know what else to do with it. She waited. I think she'd want me to give it to someone who'd wear it. He held it out. Cassidy took it with both hands. I'll keep it safe, she said. He nodded. And I'll keep you. They stood close, the air between them warm from more than the stove. Outside, snow began to fall, fine and slow and certain. It didn't melt when it touched the earth. It stayed. So did she. The snow deepened over 3 weeks, laying like wool over the valley floor, muffling the sound of hooves and hammer and house doors. By December, chimneys smoked from dawn to dusk, and Red Rock moved slower, its people tucked into routine and winter patience. Cassidy moved through her days with quiet certainty. She kept the office ledgers in tidy order, ran errands wrapped in a thick shawl Malden had bought from a passing Lakota trader, and stopped each noon by the seamstresses to trade stitches for butter or soap. She never took more than she needed, and no one asked her to. Malden's room above the blacksmith had grown warmer, not from the stove but from her presence, her mending in the basket by the chair, the scent of spruce oil she used on her hands, the soft thud of her boots when she came in from the cold. She didn't live there, not formally, but her absence was never long. On the first Sunday of Advent, she stood by the church fence while the choir stumbled through a hymn, half of them off-key. Malden leaned beside her, gloved hands in his coat pockets, watching the children chase each other across the icy yard. You ever think about building something? He asked. She glanced at him. You mean like a fence? A house. She folded her arms. You asking me to build one? I'm asking if you'd want to live in one. With me. I'd want to help raise it. Choose the boards. Lay the hearth myself. He nodded once. I figured. She turned fully to face him. You sure you're ready? I've been ready since you handed me that biscuit. She laughed, her breath white in the air. You ask every woman you hire to marry you? Only the ones who make me want to stay past winter. The wedding was held 2 days before Christmas, in the parlor of the old judge's home. The church was too cold, and the preacher had taken sick, so it was the judge himself, leaning on his cane, who pronounced them husband and wife with a voice like gravel and a heart still strong. Cassidy wore a dark green wool dress, her hair pinned with laurel. Malden stood tall beside her in his best shirt, the sleeves too short at the wrists, but clean and pressed. No rings were exchanged, neither had gold, but she gave him a strip of embroidered linen she'd stitched herself, and he gave her a carved wooden comb with her initials burned into the spine. Afterward, they served stew and cornbread in the office, which had been swept and strung with pine boughs. The widow Halcombe brought cranberry preserves, and the blacksmith's wife brought cider warmed with cloves. No one mentioned the past. No one whispered. They only ate, and laughed, and stood a little closer to each other. That night, when the last lantern was out and the town lay still under moonlight, Malden led Cassidy up the stairs to his room. Their room, now. She set her comb on the windowsill. He unbuttoned her sleeves with careful hands. You cold? He asked. Not any more. He kissed her, slow and sure, and when they lay down, it was not in silence, but in something fuller, something that had taken months to grow, shaped by patience, and the quiet knowing of two people who had already lost and kept on living. By spring, they had a plot of land west of town, near the cottonwoods. Planks arrived by wagon, nails by post. The blacksmith offered help framing the roof. The deputy lent his team to haul stone for the chimney. No one asked why. They only came. Cassidy built the hearth with her own hands. Malden fitted the windows. By June, the house stood 2 rooms wide, with a porch that caught the morning sun and a garden boxed in with split rails. They moved in on the solstice, carrying their few belongings in a single wagon. That night, they sat on the porch with mugs of chicory, watching fireflies rise from the grass. I used to think peace was something you had to steal from the world, Cassidy said. And now? I think sometimes it waits for the right people to find it. Malden reached for her hand, calloused and warm. We found it. She leaned her head against his shoulder. We earned it. And they had. The town changed with them. Slowly, but surely. A new teacher arrived from Illinois, and Cassidy helped her settle. The boarding house took in another widow with 3 children, and no one turned her away. The old stories faded. New ones were told about the sheriff and his wife who'd built a home with their own hands, who never raised their voices, who gave what they had and never asked to be owed. Years passed. The orchard behind the house bore fruit. The town grew by a few families each season. Cassidy kept the ledgers in town until her eyes began to fail. Malden retired 2 winters after that, handing his badge to a younger man he trusted. On their 15th spring in the house, they sat again on the porch, Cassidy's hair silver in the sun, Malden's hand curled around hers. You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come back that day? She asked. No, he said. Because I did. And that was always enough. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. The fields were green again. And inside the house, the hearth still burned steady.